Hello, I'm Mark Malone. Welcome to the iPhone SDK for Web Developers video. In this video, I'll introduce you to some of the incredible technology and tools available to web developers in the iPhone SDK. While the bulk of the heavy lifting for the SDK was for native application support, you'll see we haven't left the web technologies behind. By the end of this video, you'll be convinced that we're focused on expanding your web development capabilities and providing an incredible user experience for your web-delivered applications. I've grouped the content of this video into two sections. First, I'll cover some web technologies that are new to Safari and iPhone. Most of these features are part of existing or emerging web standards, and for several, this is the first time they're available on any mobile device. The second section I'll cover is tools. In this section, we'll take a look at two new tools available to iPhone web app developers in the iPhone SDK. So let's get started with technologies new to Safari and iPhone. First, I'd like to highlight a couple of new JavaScript features we've added: getElement by class name and the JavaScript Selectors API. These are a great complement to other fast calls such as getElement by ID and getElements by tag name, since just about any other mechanism for gathering up a set of page nodes typically requires using JavaScript to walk a DOM tree. And walking a DOM tree for retrieval of page elements based on arbitrary property values is processor intensive, so using these native implementations are a real performance win. Since accessing elements by class name is one of the most popular features of third-party JavaScript libraries, getElements by class name was an ideal candidate for converting to a native call. It works along the same lines as getElements by tag name, returning an array of matched elements, but in this case, it's the class property. Now all elements with a given class can be returned with one function call at native speed, much faster than iterating nodes and comparing class values in JavaScript. Another fast lookup feature we've added is the JavaScript Selectors API, a part of the emerging CSS3 specification. The Selectors API is comprised of two calls that provide fast access to a collection of page elements using a CSS selector as the matching criteria. Using these functions will be immediately familiar if you're used to authoring CSS. The first, query selector, returns the first matching element for the CSS selector passed as an argument. In this example, the first element with either a foo or a bar ID is returned. The second, query selector all, returns all matching elements for the passed CSS selector. In this example, all paragraph elements with a class name of warning will be returned as an array. So that covers two fast lookup features we've added to Safari. Use them instead of walking the DOM tree. Now let's take a look at another standards-based feature we've added. With the release of the iPhone SDK, Safari and iPhone now natively supports SVG. It's version 1.1, and it's the W3C standard for vector graphics. And it's incredibly rich, supporting painting operations, gradients, patterns, compositing, animation, and so much more. It's a very rich specification. Since SVG is text, it's highly compressible on the server side for faster loading over wireless networks. And our implementation makes it a great substitute for binary image files. Unlike PNG, JPEG, GIF images, SVG is vector-based, allowing it to be scaled without degradation of image quality. What's more, Safari's implementation allows you to use SVG content as the source for image elements, or any CSS property where path to a binary image is called for. And there are several tools that support SVG content, including OmniGraffle, Inkscape, Graphics, as well as Adobe Illustrator, among others. If you've got SVG content, are looking for a plug-in-free mechanism to deliver vector-based content to the iPhone, or just looking to minimize your page size while retaining graphical pizzazz, you should definitely give SVG a whirl. Now let's take a look at some advanced CSS effects you'll want to use in your next web application. There are 3 effects we've added, and all 3 have been submitted to the W3C specifications body for an inclusion in the CSS standard. CSS effects allow you to alter style properties of page elements before they are drawn or over time. The first we'll take a look at is transforms. CSS transforms are applied to an element before it is drawn to the screen and are very useful for breaking up the typical block layout of most web pages. The second effect we'll discuss is transitions. CSS transitions are real-time element animation. That is, animation that occurs within the page after it is rendered by the browser. Transitions are considered implicit because the intermediate style values of an animated element are calculated by the browser engine. You just provide the begin and the end values. This is really powerful. Remember, before CSS-based motion effects, if you wanted to animate an element, you'd alter one or a set of its style properties a fixed amount over time using a JavaScript callback function like setTimeout or setInterval. With CSS-based motion effects, element properties can be instructed to animate smoothly without these callback routines. The third effect we'll look at is animations. CSS animations, like CSS transitions, provide smooth animation of style properties. However, CSS animation gives you even greater control. CSS animation is considered explicit animations since some or all of the intermediate style values are explicitly provided by you, the web developer. Let's get some details on each of these, beginning with transforms. Using CSS transforms, the presentation of targeted elements can be altered before they're rendered by the browser. There are two ways of specifying a transform effect. You add either the WebKit transform or WebKit transform origin CSS property to your target element. WebKit transform origin allows you to specify an XYZ coordinate as the origin for the transformation. Now, the default value for the origin when used with WebKit transform is the center of the target element. Both transform properties take one or more transform functions to indicate the effect to be applied. They include skew, which takes an angle to be applied to the bottom left of the page. Here I'm passing 45 degrees as the function. There's scale, which takes a scale factor to be applied to the element. I'm using 1.5 for this example. There's rotate, which takes an angle for rotation. This example is using 40 degrees. And translate. Translate takes a number to be added to the current origin. This example uses 50. As I said, you can apply several transform functions to an element with one property setting, giving you a variety of presentation possibilities. And when combined with CSS-based motion effects, I'll discuss next, your transformations can be directed to occur smoothly over time. So that's CSS transforms. Let's talk about transitions. You specify a CSS transition by adding the WebKit transition style property to the element of your choice. First, you need to specify the style property you wish to vary using WebKit transition property. In this example, I'll vary the opacity of the CSS document on the right. Then you specify the duration of the transition using WebKit transition duration, 2 seconds in my case. And finally, provide a timing function that defines the acceleration characteristics of the transition using WebKit transition timing function. In this example, I'm using linear, which means I want a constant rate of change of my opacity. Now, there are several predefined timing functions that you can use, including ease in, ease out, etc. Or you can even provide your own in a matrix. With the property, duration, and timing function defined, the transition animation will be triggered the next time a value is assigned to the style property I chose. Animation then occurs between the element's initial value and the value I just assigned, leaving the browser engine to determine the number of steps for the specified duration and the appropriate intermediate values required to fit the timing function I chose. Remember, the only thing I did was trigger the animation to set the new opacity value. No repeated calls to set timeout or set interval. And keep in mind that CSS transitions are hardware accelerated, so your animation will be very smooth in Safari and iPhone. So that was transitions. Let's look at the animations. CSS animations are similar transitions in that they change the value of a style property over time. However, animations allow you to provide explicit values for the properties being animated. Many aspects of animation can be controlled, including how many times an animation iterates, whether or not it alternates between begin and end values, if it can be paused, or to set the delay of its start. There's even more. The primary properties to set for animations are the name of the keyframe describing the explicit property and values to be assigned over the animation cycle. Here's an example of a keyframe definition on the right. The keyframe style rule consists of a list of percentage values. used to specify the properties and values at a given point in the duration of the animation. 0 is where the animation begins. At 25% or the quarter of the way through the animation, the 25% settings are used, and so on, ending with the settings at 100%. Then you specify the duration of the animation. And finally, the number of times the animation should cycle. And voila, your animation takes place. There's a lot of rich animation options I didn't describe in this overview, so take a look at the specification and see how creative you can get. And again, since this animation code is hardware accelerated, the movement will be as smooth on the iPhone as it is in this video. So that's the wrap on CSS effects, available in Safari and iPhone. They're an emerging standard, so keep your eye on the spec. I'm sure you'll agree they provide a lot of presentation power already. We're even using them in a developer tool I'll discuss a little bit later. Okay, let's shift gears here a bit and discuss a few new features that give web-developed applications a built-in feel and functionality. Let's begin with offline data support. This is client-side persistence that goes well beyond cookies, and it's part of the draft DHTML5 specification standard. It's a lightweight JavaScript API consisting of only a few required calls. Open Database is one, to open or create your database. This function takes the database name, a web app can have multiple databases, a version number to support schema changes, a database description, something that's usable and readable by users, and the desired database size. Once you have a database, you can access your data via the execute SQL function, which takes a number of parameters, the most important being your SQL statement. And you'll notice it takes familiar SQL syntax to read and write data, so anyone with database experience will feel right at home. It's full-featured with transaction support if you need it, and all calls can be wrapped within a transaction to generate a callback indicating its success. And it's secure. The security rules are the same as those for frames or iframes. No cross-domain access, that is, databases can only be accessed by scripts from the same domain that created them. Properly structured web applications that take advantage of client-side database support can be totally functional even with the network disconnected. Next up is another new feature that makes a web-developed application feel built-in, and it's full screen mode. Full screen mode displays your web application without the standard Safari address bar or navigation buttons. So a web application that used to look like this can now take advantage of the full screen. To have your application appear in full screen mode, you need to provide a home screen icon. Home screen icons are used when the user wishes to save a bookmark of your web app to their home screen. To associate a home screen icon with your web app, just put a 60 by 60 pixel ping file named Apple Touch Icon at the root of your web folder, or add a link tag to your web page with a reference to this icon. Next, add a meta tag with the following property to the head element of your page. Now, when a user taps on your home screen icon, your web app is launched in full screen mode with the Safari address bar and navigation controls gone, giving your app much more screen real estate and making it feel more built-in. Calls to other iPhone applications and other web properties works from within this full screen mode as well. However, calls like window.open or anchors that target new windows open the Safari application, where those pages can be viewed. Full screen mode is one of the most requested features from web developers. I'm sure you'll appreciate its capabilities. The final feature I want to discuss is gesture events. Now you can create an even more interactive user interface, since your elements can receive the same high-level gestures passed to built-in applications. These events include gesture start, gesture change, and gesture end. You can inspect the properties of these events to determine the number of fingers involved, if the user is rotating the gesture or attempting to scale content by pinch open or pinch close gesture. To take advantage of gesture events, all you need to do is add the appropriate event handler to the element you wish to receive the event. Now, instead of attempting to determine high-level user interaction by looking at typical mouse or window events, you get the perform gesture hand-delivered. If you're building web apps for iPhone, you'll want to use these events instead of mouse events to give your applications a more built-in view. So that's gesture events, a new implementation and another popular request from web app developers. And that concludes our overview of a few of the great web features we'll be adding to the iPhone SDK. I think you'll find them very useful for your current or next great iPhone web application. Now let's talk about tools. The iPhone SDK contains two tools that web app developers will find extremely useful. First is the iPhone Simulator. It's a desktop application that comes with the Safari and iPhone browser built right in, allowing you to test your web content on your local machine before pushing it to a remote host for viewing on an iPhone or iPod Touch. The iPhone Simulator is the real deal. It runs your JavaScript and accurately displays your web content, including the correct scaling. It provides the same debug console available in Safari and the iPhone, so you can use the same console log statements you're used to using when debugging locally. There's support for rotation, and naturally the ability to generate and receive multi-touch events like pinch open, pinch close, pan, tap, double tap, zoom in, zoom out, even swipe. This is a real time saver, especially when you want to keep developing when you don't have access to a wireless network. So that's the iPhone Simulator. Now you can accurately test your iPhone web applications right on your desktop. Now let's talk about the second tool available for web developers in the iPhone SDK. The second tool is Dashcode. You may already know Dashcode is a great way to build dashboard widgets on macOS X. Well, we've extended this powerful tool to support the development of browser-based applications as well. Dashcode's layout tools, composers, and editors simplify the process of creating many of the resources of a web application. It also includes handy coding and debugging tools that help you manage and test any code you write for Safari and iPhone. Let's take a look at a few of the key features of the Dashcode IDE. Dashcode comes with templates for iPhone web applications and projects that you can use as the starting point of your next project or review as coding examples. These templates come with built-in panel transitions based on the accelerated CSS animation I discussed earlier in this video. You just pick a project template and go. In Dashcode, you'll see we've got everything laid out for you. There's a project organizer on the left listing your project's objects and files, and on the right you'll see a fully editable preview of your application, along with the source code for the project of a selected object or page. You can display the inspector window that contains panels allowing you to review and set various attributes of a selected page element, including their appearance, position within the page, text or style information, even associate event handlers, and there's even a handy parts library. The library gives you a set of predefined user interface elements, including common panels with built-in animation, controls, and page elements. Just drop them into your page and customize. Once you've laid out your user interface, you can test and debug your project right from within the Dashcode environment. Choose Run, and your index page is opened in the simulator. It's fully interactive, so you've got breakpoints set, and they're triggered. Execution will be paused, and you can drop right into the Dashcode debugger. It's a full-featured debugger, so you can step through your code, view the stack, inspect variables, or even open the inspector window to inspect runtime objects or execute arbitrary JavaScript calls. So that's your introduction to Dashcode for web app development. I think you'll find that Dashcode greatly simplifies the process of developing iPhone web applications. With layout, reusable parts, and debugging built right in, you may never need another tool. And that completes the tools section and brings us to the end of this video. We've covered a lot of ground. From the new features to the new tools, it should be clear that we're not standing still when it comes to web app development for iPhone. If you're looking for more information, the definitive place to look for iPhone developer resources is at developer.apple.com/iPhone, where you'll find orientation videos, technical documentation, and lots of sample code. Additionally, we have many valuable developer discussion lists you can search or join at lists.apple.com. Finally, feel free to contact me via email at mmalone@apple.com with any questions you may have about the material in this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm sure you'll agree that the features we've added really raise the bar for web app development and user experience. We've incorporated a lot of your feedback into this release, and I look forward to hearing more as you explore the capabilities available in the iPhone SDK.